I've been very lucky to be able to study storytelling from many different perspectives. While I lived in Los Angeles in America, while I was there, I ran a production company called Luminary Productions. And now we've got a branch of it here in Australia as well. And because of this, I got to learn storytelling from the perspective of videographers and directors. I got to learn how they storytell visually. Now, more than this, I also learned about storytelling in the world of magic. How storytelling can enhance magic and bring the magic to life. And then I finally learned storytelling as a keynote speaker, as someone who storytells on stage with thousands of people in the audience often. So I've been able to look at storytelling from many different perspectives. And what I've been able to do is I've been able to learn all the different types of storytelling formulas. And after learning them all, you've got 7-step formulas, 10-step formulas, 20+ step formulas, especially when you're scripting for a movie. And I realized that the more complex a formula, the less likely you are to actually follow it, and the less likely you are to even use it. So to me, I wanted to find the most distilled version of a storytelling formula, and I've discovered it. So the storytelling formula I'm going to share with you, there are only 3 steps. But please don't confuse simplicity for stupidity. Simplicity, again, is distilled power. It's distilled wisdom. Now, the first step when it comes to great storytelling, step 1, is called the incident. The incident. Now, the incident is made up of many ingredients. And here are the ingredients. It's made up of the who, the where, the what, and the when. These are the basic ingredients you must have when you storytell. Now, a lot of storytellers have the who, what, where, and when, but they don't have the next 2 ingredients when they're setting up the incident. And when you don't have the next 2 ingredients, you're gonna just be an okay storyteller. Whereas if you want to be a great storyteller, you've got to have the next 2 ingredients. Now, the next one is you want to include VAX, V-A-K-S. And when you include VAX, this is when you add color to the story. And what do I mean by VAX? The V in VAX stands for visual. The A stands for auditory. The K stands for kinesthetic. And the S stands for smell. This is how you add color to the story and start to bring the story to life. Again, when you think about the story I told of how I met my wife, with that particular story, I told you the visuals. I described to you it was a 2-level club. You know, there's the bottom club, the bottom level for, you know, the normal folk, and then the upper one for the high roller folk. And then after that, I also told you about a bit of the auditory, loud music, kinesthetic, how I felt. Oh, I was feeling nervous. Oh my goodness, when she saw me, I lost all my confidence. And then I even quickly touched on smell when we were standing next to the toilets and it smelled a bit like pee. Crazy things that I like to point out, but it actually smelled pretty bad. And that's me using VAX just to quickly add a little bit of color to the story. And the final ingredient that we must add if we want to become great storytellers is what is known as bringing the characters to life. You want to bring the characters to life. Now, the way you can do this is you can use 2 methods to do this. You can bring them to life with your body language, and then you can also bring the characters to life with dialogue. Body language and dialogue. If you recall the story of how I met my wife again, I was bringing the characters to life. When I played myself and my wife, I played myself, you know, walking all kind of, you know, all confident. And then when she looked at me, I kind of lost all my confidence. I showed you that with my body language. And then I played myself in one spot. I said, you know, would you be impressed if I transformed the King of Hearts into the Queen of Hearts? And then I played my wife. So I switched over and played my wife's character, and I brought her to life with my body language. Now, more than this, I brought in dialogue. I was able to bring myself to life by doing that cheesy voice there. Would you be impressed? I brought myself to life with dialogue in my voice. And then I did my wife's voice as well. I did the whole higher pitch voice. I went I'd be more impressed if you transformed yourself into a real man. As opposed to, imagine I told the story and I said, I played myself and I didn't do the nervous voice and I just said, so I said to her, would you be impressed if I transform a King of Hearts into the Queen of Hearts? You know, and then she looked at me and she said, I'd be more impressed if you transformed yourself into a real man. Like, again, it just loses its power. And when you bring the characters to life with body language and dialogue, what happens is you go from reporting a story to reliving a story. Most people, when they storytell, they just report stories. And the difference between reporting and reliving is you bringing the characters to life. That's how you relive a story. Otherwise, if I was reporting the story, all I'd say is, you know, I met my wife 10 years ago. We met at a bar called Distill. I showed her a quick magic trick. She didn't like it. So to me, I just tried to come back again to see if I could court her and see her again. And I did. And the final time I saw her, instead of showing her a magic trick, we went out for a coffee and we got married. You see, I'm still using my instrument well, but I'm not following the ingredients. I just had the who, what, where, and when, didn't have any vacs, and I didn't bring the characters to life. I hope you can see the difference now, and a clear difference between how most people just report stories. If you want to become an exceptional storyteller, you want to relive them. Now, there are two problems when it comes to storytelling. Two problems. Now, problem number one is that you take too long to set up the incident. You take way too long. That's what I used to do. This was something that I was guilty of. When I first met my wife and we started going out and we started dating more, I used to storytell in a way that causes her to always go, oh my goodness, what is the point of this story? But she'd never say that, of course, because when we were dating, we were still trying to, court each other. So she dealt with it. But now that we're married, it drives her insane. And often when I storytell, before I learned this formula well, she'd often go, oh, can you just, can you get to the point? And that's the problem, is that when we take too long to set up the incident, people lose interest. And I used to get caught up in this. I used to take too much time describing exactly where I was, describing the room. And oh, by the way, that room had a really cool painting that had a playing card in it. Isn't it so weird it had a playing card in it? Why would it have a playing card in it? I wonder if it's a magic-related painting. And then I just take too long to get to the point of the story. So the first problem is that it takes too long. It takes too long. Now, the second problem is that it's too short. And this is how I know my wife and I are perfect for each other, is that I take too long to tell a story. She doesn't give me enough of the ingredients. She'll just tell me a story and then she'll just go, and that's why we're never going to that grocery store again. And I kind of go, I was listening because you always told me that I'm not listening, but I don't even know why we're not going to that grocery store because that's my favorite grocery store. And then she doesn't give me enough information. She doesn't give me enough context. So you've got to make sure that it's not too long and it's not too short. You want to make sure you've got enough of the ingredients so that you can bring the story to life, but not too much so that you end up suffocating the story. So not too much and not too little. And the ideal time that I've discovered as a keynote speaker and as someone who uses stories often at dinner and at gatherings is that the optimal time for a story is about 2 to 3 minutes. This is the optimal time for a beginner. As you're just starting out your journey as a storyteller, around 2 to 3 minutes setting up the incident, that's acceptable. That's okay. Now, if you want to see some expert storytellers, just look up some stand-up comedians. And when you look up these stand-up comedians, you'll notice that they can tell a story. They can set up the incident, bring the characters to life, add the vacs, who, what, where, and when. They can do this often in 30-second bits. And it takes them a year, months, to distill their storytelling down to 30 seconds. So don't hold yourself to the same level of expectation. We can move towards shortening the story, getting it to maybe 2 minutes, closer to 2 minutes, maybe a minute. And understand that if you ever want to get it down to 30 seconds like stand-up comedians, that's going to take a lot of polishing and a lot of practice. That's the first step for the incident. Now, the second step is, I've already kind of mentioned it, but the second step in storytelling is the point. What's the point of the story? What is the point? I mean, when you're storytelling, if you don't have a point, this is one of the things that annoys people the most, especially when you're using it in a professional context. Sometimes you might be storytelling to a friend and the whole purpose of it is just because it was entertaining. That's fine. But if you're using storytelling in a professional context and you don't have a point, it drives people crazy. And that's when people think and have the perception that storytelling is unprofessional. It's not because storytelling is unprofessional, it's because the storytelling that they've experienced so far in a professional setting wasn't very good. And you've got to make sure a part of that is that you've got a point to your story. And this is how you can let people know that the point is about to arrive. You use this sentence to let people know that this is the point of the story. This is what you say. You say the following. The reason I'm telling you this is because. This line is psychologically going to get people to pay more attention the moment you say it. This is a way to pique their interest and pique their attention. And the reason this piques their interest is because when you say the word, the reason I'm telling you this is because, it lets them know you're about to turn information into insight. You're about to turn information into insight. And this is how people know to increase their levels of attention, because most people want to know why you're telling them this story. They're thinking that in the back of their head. They're thinking, the moment you start storytelling, they're thinking, why are you telling me this story? Now, if you take too long, they start to get annoyed and go, I don't understand why this person's telling me this story. But if you take about 2 to 3 minutes to tell the story, it makes them very engaged, because they're thinking, I wonder why this person's telling me the story. And at this level of interest, it's still positive. Whereas if you take too long, it turns into negative interest. But in the beginning, it's kind of like, oh, I wonder why they're telling me. And then when you say the line, the reason I'm telling you the story is because, they're like, oh, here we go. I'm about to get context as to why. And then that's where you have them hooked. Another quick reason why this is so powerful is simply because you've got the word you in there. And we've all heard about people saying, when you're standing there and talking to an audience, they're just thinking, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And it's true, that's what they're most likely thinking. So by you using the word you, the reason I'm telling you this is because it just makes them engage more. These are the first 2 steps when it comes to great storytelling. Now, before you go any further, before we go to the final step of storytelling, I want you to find a story in your life. Any story will do for now. And then I want you to take that story and plug it into this formula. And remember, when you're setting up the incident and you're taking the story and you're making sure you've got all the necessary ingredients, really push yourself with bringing the characters to life. Make sure you include some dialogue. Find some opportunities to include some dialogue. And make sure you bring them to life. This is the opportunity for you to break the mold and not play within your comfort zone, but push yourself outside of your comfort zone if you normally don't bring the characters to life. Make sure you've got a bit of axe there too. And here is where you double check. Are you taking longer than 2 to 3 minutes to set up the incident? And the final one that you learnt was about the point. Make sure at the end of your story you use the sentence, the reason I'm telling you this is because. When people don't do this, they tend to waffle on with their stories. They tend to, oh yeah, by the way, let me tell you about who else was there. I was with my good friend Lenny, and then, oh, let me tell you about Lenny. What happens is, this is when you see people go off on tangents and start to ramble. Use this sentence. It helps you take off well with the plane and then land the plane beautifully, if you would, as a metaphor. It just helps you tie a nice bow on the story by using the sentence, the reason I'm telling you this is because. Spend a bit of time taking the story and plugging it into this formula. Don't go ahead until you've done this. See you in the next video.